Welcome, everyone, to episode 83 of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, and even though I live here in Brooklyn, New York, I'm wondering why these birds are chirping so loudly inside my apartment. Also, in case you're wondering, I do have a tattoo of a taco. It's just not on my ass, unfortunately.
You gotta stop taking all my intros every time. You took two intros. You stole them both. You're a wizard.
You know what? Mondo bad planning, Steve.
Damn it.
Was that your backup?
You have all of them. It's a full triptych. You have all my backup intros.
Like, who is like here with like me right now?
Well, it's like Steve Guntley, completely without a tagline. This is the podcast about dick biting, cocaine sneezing, and puke attacks. That's because this is the podcast about Dreamaniac, the mainstream film debut of one Mr. Dave DeCoteau, the hardest working man in show business, as far as I can see. We're excited to be getting into it. This is the very first DeCoteau film, at least the very first one that's going to cross our desk at the very least. So we're excited to be talking about it. And we have a very cool guest here with us today. And I'm not actually mad that you took my tagline, incidentally, in case listeners are worried. Mommy and Daddy are not fighting.
We're not. We've settled all of our differences. So we have a really cool guest. You know, it would have been Mondo bad planning on our part if we did not, close the sphere of Evolution of Horror, or at least Mates of Hell related guests. And so we've had Stevie Webb on, we've had Brad Hansen on. So it only would make sense that we would have Alex Ayling on this show. Alex contributes a lot to Brain Rot, one of the three Mates of Hell. Just a really great content creator and podcaster, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say about this movie that was forced upon him by me. Alex, thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, fellas, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
We're very happy to have you. We usually offer our guests either a choice. You can pick a movie that you're really passionate about, or you can spin the wheel and see where you end up. And you ended up on a Wizard Video movie, which is
wow.
Oh boy.
Let me tell you, this was a wild ride as well. This was
Absolutely
a wild ride.
This is the first time watch for all of us, or Jared, have you seen this one before?
So I watched when we started once we started kind of landing guests for the show, maybe a year ago, consistently landing guests for the show, I was like, all right, well, let me check out some of these titles. Let me see if there are any that jump right out for potential future guests. And so I watched Dreamaniac probably like 9 months ago.
Okay.
It didn't really jump out immediately to anyone. And then also we had a lot of people kind of chiming back in, being like, oh, I'll grab this one and I'll grab this one. So it wasn't one that we were going to do in the near future at that point. Mm-hmm. So when I watched it in preparation for this show, it was my second time viewing it.
Okay. All right.
And what was it about Dreamaniac that made you think, like, I know, we need to get that guy from London on?
Well, I'll tell you, as a matter of fact, and I stand by this. So before we get into anything about the movie proper, you, Alex, are often on a lot of Stevie Webb's Brain Rot episodes as one of the Mates of Hell. And on that show, Stevie covers what he considers to be like the best and worst of the horror movies of the 80s and 90s. And this one very much feels, to me, in spirit, to sort of a really, I'm going to use this phrase, and I don't want people to think that this is how I'm judging the movie itself, but kind of a bottom of the barrel pick where like you and Brad and Stevie would all kind of be staring blankly at each other in front of your microphones, like, what is this movie? Where did we find this movie? I felt like it was a nice extension of something you could have potentially covered on Brain Rot. And so I said, I feel like this guy's life is going too well. I need to throw him a curveball.
Well, listen, I completely agree with you. This was slap bang in the middle of exactly the kind of thing that had I chosen to watch this of my own volition, I probably would feel one way about it. But knowing that I was going to be talking about it with some experts and some people who could dissect it with me just made the whole experience a lot more enjoyable. I think there's a lot of fun stuff to get into. And yeah, I'm very pleased that this movie has made its way into my life. I know you guys will probably be able to help me. Like, is it quite underseen? Like, I've never heard anybody talking about it.
I think it is. Yeah, I think this one's pretty obscure, as a lot of Wizard Video stuff tends to be. Wizard Video is Charles Band's like pickup label, you know, for movies that he didn't produce but that he like wants to purchase and distribute, and they are usually teeny tiny little indie sleazy movies. What have we had so far? We've had
we've had our
Love.
Psychos in Love. We had our Tim Kincaid triple feature, which
Vicious
was
Lips. Yeah,
and the Tim Kincaid triple feature was amazing. There's a lot of parallels between those movies and this one. So that for anyone who wasn't able to catch that episode yet, that was Breeders, Robot Holocaust, and Mutant Hunt. And we had the incredible Jed Shepard on the show with us to talk about that. And I mean, you want to talk about somebody who just has their PhD in sleaze.
I mean, I think watching those three movies gives you your PhD in sleaze. I think we all have it now if we watch those three, because
that's your final thesis statement, right?
Exactly.
Before you have to take a very hot shower.
Yeah, exactly. What are your bona fides? Well, I watched Robot Holocaust without the robots chatting over it. Haha. That's right. I raw dogged Robot Holocaust.
And now you and your daughter are doomed. That's for anyone who has seen Robot Holocaust, you'll understand what we mean there. But before we talk about Dreamaniac proper, Alex, you are one of the mates of hell. You've watched a ton of 80s and 90s slashers and low-budget horror movies. So I know Stevie and Brad have shared their stories of their love of horror movies from a young age. Were you similar to them in that way, or are you sort of like one of the people who came to the game a little bit later and you kind of are thrown things in the fashion that you were for this show too?
So I guess it's a similar story, although I think that different from Stevie and Brad, my parents were a little bit more controlling. Well, not controlling, concerned, I guess, about what I was going to watch. They were small C conservative. We lived in a little kind of village joined onto a town, so the local video store was a big Blockbuster. Loved going there, but I never got to rent the things I wanted to rent that I could see on the shelves. So it was always, at sleepovers, at next door neighbors' houses, at where things snuck in. And actually, I realized when I was going through your back catalogue of episodes that the first horror movie that I ever watched, and probably the one that I think unlocked a new part of my soul and my personality, was this one that I'm just holding up, which is great for an audio podcast, Prison.
Man, we love that movie.
Yeah, so that was the first horror film I ever saw. And now I've got this, and this is I've got this lovely Blu-ray copy from 88 Films, which is a prized possession now.
Yeah, those are hard to find. Yeah,
two questions I have for you, Alex. One, is that region free? And two, is it still in print?
Will you send it to me? I bought it off eBay. So I don't know if it's still in print. Yeah,
because when we watched that movie, I think we had to find. There's a pretty decent quality dub on YouTube, but that's the only way we could find it. Like even trying to
Steve, you are wrong. Some of us got to watch it on the big screen.
That's right.
As I brushed my shoulders off.
You kind of lucked into that. Like, it just so happened
on the big screen.
Yeah,
wasn't it? It was just like a random.
It was the most random thing. We set up. We scheduled our recording for the episode, and then I was like, all right, well, I got to track down that movie somehow. And then Nighthawk Cinema, local cool like Brew and View movie house that's nearby, does a thing called Ridiculous Sublime, where some of the employees curate really fun screenings. And 2 days before our recording was happening, they showed Prison.
Oh,
and it could not have,
it's supposed to be.
Planned it better.
But look at this. Look at that. I think this is the original cover.
Oh my good, yeah. I love that little skull with like the skull with the face as the teeth.
And the jail bars on it. And so this is my origin story. I guess was Prison,
Amazing.
And then weirdly then became my origin story with Stevie, because he said like, hey, do you want to come hop on Patreon and talk about a movie? And I was like, I have never talked about this one. And so I went on there, and then I guess that's where I found my brain rot voice as well. And had a lot of fun, and then he paired me up with Brad, and we've been doing Mates of Hell ever since. So that's if you're not familiar, which you should be.
Yeah,
we're doing we do like a different Fulci film every month on the Brain Rot Patreon. We're going to run out soon. We've just done Conquest. Have you guys seen Conquest?
no, never have. That's a Fulci.
Listen, it's a Fulci. Imagine if Fulci directed Krull.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah.
So somebody's
It's sort
gonna
of
get a
like-
glaive in the eye.
Oh yeah, it's Krull meets oh god, what was that film called? Bone Tomahawk. Krull
Oh my
meets Bone
God.
Tomahawk,
I am sold.
as directed by Lucio Fulci.
I know.
Again.
I'm sad to admit that I've never seen this movie, but I listened to the episode on Conquest,
Okay.
Yeah.
and
So
I'm
the
like, it's made my
yeah, the-
short list.
Yeah, the quality of the print is similar to Dreamaniac that we watched. So don't
Yeah.
expect to be able to see anything in any fidelity, but it's a vibe nonetheless. So yeah,
Well-
anyway, once again, Jared, you warned me about tangents, but here we are. This is what you get with me. So
Yep. Tangents
that
are
was
welcome.
Welcome.
that was my origin. That was the first horror movie I saw, and then I guess rather than being like video store, we were quite lucky. My family was quite lucky. We got cable TV quite early, and so I spent a lot of time. There were a few channels in the UK here that would play movies late at night, and I'd set the VCR to record and then check them out like later. And so that was where I discovered a whole load of things. And once I'd watched Evil Dead 2, that was when I knew.
Mhm.
Like that was that if Prism was the way in, Evil Dead 2 was the cementing, and that's where we went. And
It's
then
the prison to Evil Dead pipeline.
Yeah,
exactly. One of many, I'm
Tragic,
sure, down
tragic.
that conveyor
Well,
belt.
We are here to talk about Dreamaniac, which I'm going to have to say, to answer your question also, Alex, I do believe is quite underseen by a lot of people. Just purely out of curiosity, I looked to see if this movie was covered by a lot of other podcasts, and it's been covered maybe by 4 or 5 podcasts, but it's really not something that's just out there that the mainstream horror viewing public or even outside of the horror viewing public really knows about. So Steve, with that in mind, why don't you fire off a couple of stats about this movie, and then we will add a nice little fun addition to our formatting.
Most certainly. So Dreamaniac was released November 26, 1986. It's directed by David DeCoteau, written by Helen Robinson and Anne Lewis Hamilton. And it stars Thomas Byrne, Ashlyn Gear as Kim McCamey, Sylvia Summers, Lauren Peterson, Bob Pelham, and Cynthia Crass. Now, as I mentioned, this is the mainstream feature film debut of David DeCoteau, who is one of the most prolific schlock directors of all time. I say that affectionately, but the man is popping up in our show nearly every other week.
This is episode 83, and we've
Yeah.
talked about him probably 60 times.
I'd be willing to bet even the films he hasn't directed, he has a hand in, because he's just kind of like a full moon lifer. He and Charles Band have been friends for 40 years now, and they just kind of interact with each other quite a bit. Now, look, the man has directed 182 films in his career. All right, some of them are god awful trash, but every once in a while he directs Puppet Master 3, which is like one of the top 3 movies on both of our full moon ranking lists. Like, it's an incredible movie, and it's the best Puppet Master film. So like, he's got it in him when he wants it, but he also just loves to work, and he loves to crank them out, so he gets as many movies out as he possibly can, and he just doesn't really worry so much about critical response or things like that. He just kind of gets it done.
And speaking of cranking it out, Steve,
Yeah.
David DeCoteau had made a bunch of movies before this, 32 to be exact, for Marathon Films,
Yes.
which is a large label that specialized in gay pornography.
Sure is.
And which released one of my favorite titled movies of all time from 1983, which is called Gayracula.
Gayracula. Oh, I love that. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that name, and this was the first DeCoteau movie that he would make that was a mainstream movie.
Yeah.
And it was a movie that he was making, and then Charles Band became interested in acquiring. And legend has it that when this screening of this movie ended, a screening that Charles Band had of the completed film, he turned to David DeCoteau and held up 10 fingers and said, and mouthed the words 10-finger deal to him, which is, I mean, really interesting that he saw that much here, that he won. I mean, I guess the ability to take $60,000 and make
Anything.
a feature of this quality. But yeah, that's the movie we're talking about, Dreamaniac. And Alex, you know, we would be remiss if we did not ask you, one of the Mates of Hell, to prepare for us a plot synopsis. Now, this is one of my favorite parts of the Mates of Hell episodes where, you know, you or Brad or Stevie present a pretty thorough plot synopsis. I always have a good laugh at these. And so I want to hear your take on Dreamaniac. So let our listeners know what they're in for when they pop this movie into their VCR.
Okay, so I've assumed two things here. I've assumed that we're doing spoilers and that I can swear,
Yes,
I can
please.
curse. So
Absolutely.
feel free to beat me out if either of those things
No,
are
both
not
are
allowed.
great.
But okay, let's go. It's 1986, and presented in glorious potato vision, we have Dreamaniac, in which a maniac has dreams, or there's a dream of a maniac, or a dream conjures a maniac, or maybe it's not that deep. Anyway, we are introduced to our main complicated protagonist, that's code for asshole, Adam, who is having a naked nighttime stroll around a fog-filled pink neon-lit house. He happens upon a woman in a blood-filled bath, but when she scratches him during their nude embrace, he wakes up from the film's first and only dream. It turns out that Adam is a part-time Satanist, part-time house sitter, and full-time Def Leppard fan. His girlfriend, Pat, is an opportunistic entrepreneur, purveyor of witty put-downs, and extremely bad judge of character. And she's renting Adam's house out to her sister, Jodie, who is throwing a sorority party so she can subject everyone to the sounds of her favorite album, 1980s synth library music. Unfortunately, for the uniformly unlikable partygoers, they won't have much time to enjoy Jodie's plans, which include tequila, popcorn, hash brownies, and charades, because Adam has summoned a succubus. Lily is disguised as a hitchhiker, and she starts fucking and killing people, not necessarily in that order. As we approach the third act, these final girls are not with the program. Forget running up the stairs when you should be going out the front door. These two are having a full candlelit satanic ceremony when they should be chopping off heads and staking hearts. Things get suitably bloody and surprisingly gory by the end, but the viewer is left with a few very important questions unanswered, including, what exactly was Adam getting in exchange for summoning the demon? Does Jodie have a tattoo of a taco on her ass? Why was everyone fighting over Brad? Was it just the outfit? Will Lionel Richie fans and heavy metal fans ever reach a peaceful accord? Will the makers of Slumber Party Massacre ever get their power drill back? And finally, are you fucking serious that this whole film was just someone narrating the shitty pulp novel they just wrote down the phone?
Bravo.
Well done. Well done. You got much more coherent plot structure out of that movie than I did, and that I would argue David DeCoteau did. That was great. That was amazing. Potato Vision is so apt because is this the physically hardest to look at movie we've come across so far? I looked for this. This is available in a couple of different like free watching sources, and I checked all of them, and they're all in this same extremely gauzy Vaseline covered view. And then if you look on IMDb at the still images, that's what those look like on there too. So I think this is the only quality this is available in.
This is a tie for me with Mutant Hunt.
Mutant Hunt looked pretty bad. Yeah,
of like
true.
Movies where I could not tell who was on screen.
Genuinely could not tell the difference between the characters.
There were whole shots where there was like a big like synth sting and a revelation, and I was like, I don't know what that is. I can't see it. Is that a dead cat? Is that a bloody countertop? It's just murky, beigey, browny, no idea.
Yeah. It was really physically hard to look at, and so I had a hard time following really much of anything that was going on up until that final reveal, which I'm going to want to dedicate a little bit of time to. But a little bit more context about DeCoteau, just so we know where we're at. He's 24 years old when he's making this movie, okay? He started his career when he was 18, when he was working as a PA for Roger Corman, and I think that happened, that lasted very briefly, only a movie or two, before he transitioned over to the aforementioned pornographic world, where he made 32 films in 3 years. So he learned how to work quickly. And when he started pitching this movie around, the original title of this movie, the one that makes more sense, is Succubus. Okay, because that's what this movie
Sure.
is ostensibly about. It's about a succubus. They changed the title to Dreamaniac because of a little guy that nobody liked named Freddy Krueger, who became a big success in 1984. And so all of a sudden, Charles Band, with his eye for marketing and capturing the zeitgeist, he's like, all right, well, we need our own Freddy Krueger style dream monster killer thing, So they created a poster that looks pretty similar to the one for Nightmare on Elm Street, with the big evil face coming through the wall over somebody asleep. And they marketed it as Dreamaniac. Now, the problem with that is the final twist of this movie really kind of hinges on the title being Succubus. It really is kind of important that the movie keeps its original title if we want that final twist to work at all. And it was already on pretty shaky ground. So removing that kind of blows that final ending up entirely. But regardless, Charles Band really did take a liking to David DeCoteau for one reason or another, and they became regular collaborators from here on, until this very day. He would go on to take over the Torchlight division of Full Moon, and basically acts as a consultant on most movies that Charles Band has worked on. So he's a very important guy in the world of Full Moon and in the context of our show. Now you can definitely see the pornographic bona fides in this movie, kind of all over, like bona fides, exactly.
That makes so much more sense to me now. The context of that is like unlocked a whole part of the thing. Because I was thinking about this film, like there is more male nudity than female nudity, almost.
There is,
and that is like unusual, almost to the point of uniqueness. Like I can't remember another film where the ratio is this far down that.
We mentioned that you can't see a lot in this movie. The one thing you can see plenty of is outlines of dicks.
Yeah, it's true. And it was simply that most of the actors,
and the full moon.
And the full moon. Most of the actors that Dakota is working with here are from the adult world. Either all the boys, and like Kim McCamey would go on to change her name to Ashlyn Gear. This is her very first project, and she would spend the next like 25 years as a pretty well-known porn star. So there's a pipeline for sure between DeCoteau films and porn and back again. So, but I can also see why Charles Band might have taken a shine to this a little bit, just because, well, it's very cheap and kind of sleazy and works well for Wizard Video, but also this is essentially Ghoulies, right? Like
it really is.
Not as Ghoulies. It's a bunch of like a weird kind of disposable protagonist characters who go to a mansion to have a random 80s fun. There's one wacky guy there with bad eyewear who's like fucking shit up, and then there's some kind of out of nowhere Satanist plot that starts wreaking havoc on the mansion. So it's also the same thing he's going to reuse for Witch House 13 years after in 1999.
And there's elements also of Rick Sloane's Hobgoblins.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here too, minus the Hobgoblins.
Oh man, bring in those Hobgoblins. What are the Hobgoblins up to? Let's catch up with them. Yeah,
they're back in the vault.
They are. But I really had, this has a lot of hallmarks of what we come to expect in movies of this age. It's a 80-minute long movie that has 10-minute credits. It is very formless and shapeless in a lot of ways. But it does have a couple of moments that you can really sort of like, if not blowing your mind, they're at least going to make you scratch your head. Like,
Steve, I don't mean to come in and interrupt you here, but I do want to throw this question out to listeners. So puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com.
Yeah.
When you go to IMDb, this movie is listed as 82 minutes. When you watch the version that's on the Amazon Prime Full Moon app, it is 82 minutes. On the actual Full Moon app, the movie Dreamaniac is listed at 1 hour and 42 minutes.
Whoa, boy.
And so I opened that one. The credit sequence is exactly the same. I fast forwarded through it to see if there was maybe a video zone or something attached to the end of it. but I didn't watch it on that one. I said I'm watching the shorter version of this movie for the show.
Always go with the
So
shorter
I'm
version.
really curious what fills that extra 20 minutes. I thought it was a typo. I thought they
What
meant
was
to
this-
write 1
What
hour.
was this film
22
shot on?
16 millimeter.
Hmm.
I mean, it
So-
looks very much like it was shot on video, but it was not shot on video. It was shot
Yeah.
for video release on 16 millimeter.
Yeah, this
Sometimes you get that frame rate. You get that frame rate issue, don't you? Like I always remember Peter Jackson's Brain Dead had 2 different durations, and for ages I was like, "Oh, I need to see the extra footage," and it turned out it was just the different frame rate that had meant that it came out at different lengths depending on how it was transferred.
Yeah.
I'm led to believe that that's what it is, because I don't think there's any actual extra. I mean, maybe there's just like 10 extra minutes of frontal male nudity that was missing from this one.
We need more. Yeah.
The X-rated cut. Let's do it.
I mean, I tease a little bit, but it is also nice once in a while that we get movies that are embracing the opposite side of the spectrum, where it's not just gratuitous female nudity, but it's gratuitous male nudity too, because there's a big crossover between the horror community and the queer community. There is, and it's kind of an underrepresented branch of horror movies, like still to this day. So I appreciate that DeCoteau is out there, and like even at this very early age, in a time when queer culture was not really mainstreamed at the time, he was making openly queer movies, and I do appreciate that about him.
Yeah, and he doesn't do anything to try and glamorize the women in the movie, but like most of the men in the movie are hunks.
Yeah.
Like that guy Brad, when he's wearing just his pants and suspenders, I mean, that guy's got an 8-pack. And I mean, he's a hunk, and there's a couple of
He knows it
guys.
as well.
There's one guy though. I think he's the guy with the bad eyewear. I forget his character name, but I couldn't get past the fact
Jim.
something we could just
Something
say.
like that. Either way, I couldn't wait for him to die. That was in my notes. I'm like, I cannot wait for this character to die.
He looked way too much for me like George Stephanopoulos.
Is he the guy that's listening to his Walkman and doesn't hear all the commotion in that good old trope?
Oh yeah, you gotta love that guy. I mean, he's coming in here with like big Pee Wee Herman energy, as if like that's something that the ladies are finding sexy this time. I don't know. This will be a good
segue, I promise. You just brought up Pee Wee Herman, and not since Pee-wee's Big Adventure have I heard the name Frances uttered with such disdain as it is in this movie. Can we talk for a second about Frances?
Please.
Oh, she is horrible, isn't she? What a horrible, hateable character. What does she say? She's like, "Oh, you probably wouldn't have heard of me. You probably haven't met me because I've been in private schools my whole life and I'm rich as shit."
Yeah.
That was actually, I was convinced, Steve, that was going to be your intro. So I purposely left that one out because I was like, this is when I got to that line in the movie, I laughed, but then I went, I can't use it because Steve's going to use that.
Yeah. It's always hard to.
With this amount of male nudity and a character like Frances, I'm really surprised that this isn't like a queer underground cult hit that gets passed around. And I don't know. I was wondering whether, especially because there's like the guy who gets tied up in his tighty whities, and there's so much of it in this film.
Yeah.
Do you think it's just because it looks so bad that it never cut through? Otherwise, it would be one of these ones like the Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and Butcher Baker.
Well,
all those stuff.
Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is really fun as a piece of queer canon because it seems to have arrived there almost accidentally. And it's kind of this manifestation of some subconscious thing from the writer or the director, whoever it was that made those decisions. And that's what kind of made it fun and sort of subversive.
It's entirely coincidental, man. David Chaskin and Jack Shoulder, they did not know what they were doing at all. They've stated it many times.
I know. I did. That's their story. Whatever. Either way, it ended up in a funny place. But I think that this was an era when you couldn't really be openly queer with your horror movies and stuff like that. And it is also a dichotomy where we run into with a lot of David DeCoteau movies, which is, since he needs to sort of tamp that element down a little bit, we were left with a lot of movies that are all horny and no sexy. That's kind of the problem with all of his Torchlight movies too. Test Tube Teens from the year 2000 or Beach Babes from Beyond. It's like you have the ingredients of something erotic here, but the person shooting it and the person writing this is largely indifferent to heterosexual erotica and is not really shy about presenting that.
Well, that's why
DeCoteau comes alive when there is a hunk on screen.
I'm super like excited and curious to see where this goes in like a month and a half, 2 months from now, when we get to Voodoo Academy and Voodoo Academy 2.
Oh, I don't know those.
Because those, we will be covering them in the relatively near future. And the covers of both of those movies, they're both David DeCoteau joints. And the cover of both of those movies are literally just a bunch of naked, like topless beefcakes.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Yep, that is absolutely. These are like hunky prep school boys who are about to turn into monsters. Yep, yeah, absolutely.
You use the word erotic, and that gives me a good excuse. Like sometimes the thing that I like to do is watch the credits of these movies. So the end credits in particular can sometimes offer some real gems. And these ones rewarded me on the visual and the oral front. Like the music in this film, like the credits music is an absolute banger. I was well into that. But there was a credit at the end of the film for erotic illustrations by. And I would like to know at what point these erotic illustrations ever appear in the movie, because I don't remember seeing any.
Well, you wouldn't know it if they were there, because nothing would be clear that's in frame. So they could have been hung right behind our characters on the wall.
What I thought was a blank piece of paper actually was erotic illustrations.
This is the ultimate tangent, but I was recently in kind of like a sort of sketchy comedy show with friend of the show, John Golson, who was on our episode a couple of weeks back. And he gets a credit in that show. We had like a videoed like opening credit sequence. He gets a credit on there for erotic furry artist that would bring down the house every time. Like, I'm not even going to provide context of how that comes up in the show, but he's an artist. The director asked him to do some illustrations, and that brings down the house every time when it says furry illustrations by John Golson.
It's almost as good as that meme, that went around about this. They said you'll never amount to anything, and it's the guy with the movie credit of vigorous handjob guy.
Yes.
That's good.
See,
Yeah, the only other part of the credits I think worth mentioning are the special thanks section is always a gold mine, but this one is relatively brief in terms of special thanks to the Hollywood Wax Museum and Charlie and Debbie.
Yeah,
so, good for you.
Very nice. So Deborah Dion, who would become Mrs. Charles Band, maybe was already at this time, but sometime around this time, would become Charles Band's wife, but also a partner in Empire Pictures. She was the one apparently who got the script from the writer Helen Robinson to Dave DeCoteau. Now, there is a little bit of a mystery here. In David J's book, Empire of the Bees, there's a quote by David DeCoteau that's lifted that says, the writer Helen Robinson, in parentheses, not me, but a pseudonym for a new writer who is now a major television writer, end parentheses. And so I looked at Helen Robinson's IMDb credits, but the thing is, the IMDb credits under the name of Helen Robinson, they do not show us someone else's body of work.
Right.
So when you look at the IMDb for Helen Robinson, the writer here, you get Dreamaniac. She was a PA on Creepazoids. She worked on the movie Lady Avenger with Michelle Bauer.
Oh, yeah.
And then she seemed to have stopped working as of 1988. Do we know who this is?
I have no idea. And honestly, I was having a lot of trouble finding anything on this movie. Like, this is not a very well preserved movie. There's no Wikipedia article even for it. You can find a couple of like deep internet blogs kind of writing about this, usually pretty dismissively. But yeah, this is not a movie that's really captured a cult audience in the way that a lot of other DeCoteau films have, for better or for worse. I'm looking at you, a talking cat. But it's not one that's really crossed over. And I was curious about that, because DeCoteau's move, as we've seen for later in his career, is if he's unhappy with the movie that he worked on, he uses a pseudonym that's usually like a girl he knew in high school, Ellen Cabot, or he's got a bunch of them, but he tends to adopt a female pseudonym for movies that either he doesn't like or if he's like working too much and needs to kind of distribute the credits or something like that. But
yeah, he claims this one is not him and that it's someone who went on to be a prolific television writer. So for the second time in this episode, I will say puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com. If you know the mystery of who Helen Robinson really is, please let us know. I swear, like Steve said, there's not a lot on this movie.
Yeah.
We try to come into these shows as researched as possible, pulling from sources like It Came from the Video Aisle or Empire of the Bees or Charles Band's autobiography or internet blogs and articles and things like that, video zones, and just our own perspectives from the movies. But this was a tough one because there's not a lot.
Yeah. Oh wait, no. I just looked it up.
What you're saying is we're writing history right now. Like this is it. We're creating the canon for this.
We are. I just looked it up. I can confirm Helen Robinson is actually a pseudonym for was this David Mamet. Interesting. Interesting. Wouldn't have guessed. Who knew? Who knew? We all got to start somewhere, right? No.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say David Chase. Just when you started speaking, and I thought that's where you were going.
There were a few ways I was going to go. I almost threw Steve Zalian out there.
So when this movie started, after I timed them because we had a conversation in another episode we did where we were just laughing at the ridiculously drawn out credit sequence. This one is 2.5 minutes, which is still on the long side for a movie of this length. But it's not as egregious as the 5-minute opening and 5-minute closing credits of one of the movies we talked about recently.
Yeah.
But as soon as the credits were over, it cuts to an establishing shot of this house. And in my brain, I said, again, okay, so whoever is composing the music for this movie has a real love affair with the last 3 minutes of Private Investigations by Dire Straits.
Oh.
And then I've used that joke on Mike before. And I said, when did I say that? And I realized it was from Mutant Hunt. And then I said, wait a second.
Hang on.
And I worked backwards and I found that since Dreamaniac came back first, this music that was this, so whether it was composed even for Dreamaniac, I don't even really know, to be fully honest with you. But when I was looking back at the cast and crew and I looked at the music department, the music supervisor is a guy named Don Great, who I believe we brought up when we talked about Mutant Hunt. And this became like Wizard Video stock music.
Oh, okay.
So this music played also in Breeders, also in in Mutant Hunt, and presumably in a ton of other Wizard Video movies. And I recognized it immediately. I was like, I've heard this music before.
Yeah.
And it was specifically from Mutant Hunt. So I just find that kind of funny. Like there's this one sort of and not just one, there are multiple, like Alex mentioned before, there's a whole temp track library in this film that are then presumably reused all throughout the movies that were picked up and distributed by Wizard Video.
Yeah.
But this music slaps. It's great.
It's pretty fun. Yeah. The music's not bad. And I'm always going to be in for kind of generic library 80s B movie music because it's always that's kind of the music that's sort of that anytime there's new music these days, it sounds like this, I'm seeking out kind of synthy sort of dream pop like that. And they didn't know what they had back then.
But the funniest thing about the combination of the credits and the music was that there are a lot of dramatic pauses in the music that make it seem like you're about to cut to some action. But actually, all that's going to happen is there's just going to be some more credits.
Just some more credits.
Going to carry on. And that happens 3 or 4 times. And I was like, is this it? Is this going to be the movie? It's going to be too many cooks. It's just going to keep going.
It's just somebody pressing stop and flipping the cassette over.
Yeah.
I do find something charming about having very indulgent credits in movies like this, because for a lot of these people, this is their first movie. This is their only movie, maybe.
Right.
And they're also just excited that they all got together and made something. So everybody kind of wants to take their flowers, and I do appreciate that. I find it a little charming, actually. There is actually one cast member here. Usually in movies like this, the cast members don't really go on to much. There is one cast member here who is still working today. Lisa Emery, who plays Rosie, is a steady working character actor. She was in 37 episodes of the show Ozark, which was a big hit. She was on she's on one of the Walking Dead spin-off shows. She's still working to this day.
Yeah, a lot of one episode TV appearances, an arc on Jessica Jones.
Yeah. but steady work. That's hard to come by, especially like if this is your very first film, it's hard to transition out of this. Also, I do want to appreciate that, like, I've just been kind of falling into a random Valley Girl tunnel and just like my random movie watching, because this is very steeped in
Steve, is
Valley
like
Girl.
very like convenient for you, like because you're watching Dreamaniac now.
It worked out
As
really
if.
well. Because this week alone, I've watched Earth Girls Are Easy,
Great.
Night of the Comet, and then Dreamaniac.
Even greater.
So like that's a good run of Valley Girl movies.
Yeah.
I don't want to stretch this into too long of a tangent, Steve, but what did you think of Night of the Comet?
Oh, I loved it. First time
Yeah.
viewing.
I knew it was your first time watching it. I love that movie so much.
It's like the coziest post-apocalyptic movie
Yes.
you can imagine. It's oh yeah, everybody's dead and the few people alive are zombies, but let's hang out and crack some jokes.
Yeah, and like
great hairspray. Let's go.
Yeah, you got Robert Beltran in there, and you get just a great performances by Kelly Maroney and
Genuinely
Mary
very
Stewart.
funny. Yeah, loved that movie. Yeah, check out my Instagram soon for all of my Shocktober movie reviews. Minotaur Matador. I'm gonna have all by the time this comes out. That'll be long over, but yeah, I like Night of the Comet. But yeah, Dreamaniac. I'm gonna say I like less, but there have been movies from around this time and the Wizard Video era movies that have been a lot harder to watch and a lot harder to dissect. But I think we might be at a point here where we can talk about this ending, because I really want to dissect the methodology behind this. Okay, so it's all right. It's a fake out within a fake out.
I'm excited.
Steve, you saw the wrong cut. You saw the wrong cut, Steve.
Did I?
It turns out that the Dreamaniac is just Adam's sled.
Oh, of course. See, that's what you get for watching the 140-minute version.
140 minutes. Now it's 2 hours and 20.
That would be brutal. That'd be brutal. Oh, should I watch Apocalypse Now or extended edition of Dreamaniac? What should I do? Okay, but so after all this kind of succubus horror and like people turning up dead and everything like that, a completely new character walks in, interrupts the final showdown, and says, "Oh no, there's my mental patient that escaped from the jail. She does this sometimes. I hope she didn't cause you any problems." And then escorts her off the movie. The end.
At which point, also, the two people like Jodie and the people that are left are like, they just don't say anything. You could be like, yeah, she did cause me some problems. She just fucking killed everybody. Like, there's blood everywhere. There's a guy upstairs with his head off. Like, this has not been a good time.
It's so bizarre because the guy's looking at her. Her nightgown is bright red because it is soaked in other people's blood. And he's treating it like, oh, sorry, my dog got into your yard and like pulled up your ficus. I mean, like, he's treating it like that, which is already jarring. But then we shift to the screenwriter. Okay. And he is is this David DeCoteau in this scene? I don't think so, right?
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't know what he looked like.
To my knowledge of what he looked like.
But he, so we have the writer of this story is on the phone with a publisher, and he is sharing the beats of the story that he just wrote and we just watched. And he's trying to pitch this idea. He has a bunch of different ideas, the sorority house that dripped blood, or all of this stuff. And then he finally lands on the perfect title of the movie, Succubus. And there's a whole joke about how, like, oh, I don't know, that's not a very good title, but it's fine. And then he opens the door. The succubus from his screenplay is there, and she kills him, and she splatters blood all over his screenplay. And the final shot of the movie is zooming in on the title of the movie, Succubus, covered in blood, fade to black, the end. Now, you'd think when they decided to change the title of this movie, they would have had a conversation about this final scene and how it's a little. Now, don't get me wrong, it is stupid, but it is pivotal. It is pivotal. If you're gonna go with this, you need the title to be Succubus, and they fumbled that one.
Or at least go for one of the other like banger titles that he puts out here, which are all like. So he calls the other title suggestions he had were Phi Alpha Plasma.
Mm-hmm. I like that one.
Yeah. Hemoglobin House on Sorority Row. I see that you've gone for some alliteration there. I'm not quite
Someone
sure
said
it's
it's
working.
thesaurus. Yeah.
Yeah. The sorority that drip blood. But I think the sorority that drip blood is good.
That one's not bad because isn't there is a movie. No, there's a movie called The House of Drip Blood, or is that's one that Tommy Wiseau was trying to make? Or I could be wrong about that. I remember Tommy Wiseau was advertising a movie called The House That Dripped Blood from Its Walls or something like
It's
that.
the dorm that dripped blood.
Could be, yeah. There's a lot of like similarly lurid kind of titles like this, but this whole thing hinges on the movie ultimately being called Succubus. And this is such like a first film move to have like this
totally. It's such a student film vibe.
It is such a student film. Like it is such a they think I'm just making some trashy horror film, but actually it's meta, and I'm going to put myself in the story and I'm going to comment on it.
Right, and it's tongue in cheek at the end too, which is like a complete sort of, as ridiculous as things are, do it throughout the duration of the movie. They're presented pretty sincerely.
Yeah.
And then
can we talk about the tone for a second? Because like I was thinking about this, if I'd watched this underage, like if I were 12, and it had been a bit like easier to see what was going on, I think some of this stuff would have fucked me up,
Yeah.
Like the razor blade kill and the power drill through the neck and things like that, they were visceral, and the screams were really good, and it was out of tone with the rest of the campy kind of vibe that you were getting everywhere else. And I was thinking, like, if I'd been sort of watching it on a sleepover, those are the things that would have stuck in my head, like they would have fucked me up.
Yeah, well, because you would have been taking everything at face value, not this weird, insane twist at the end where they're having a play on it. Oh, maybe I'll name it this. Maybe I'll name it this. Oh, what about, I know the name, Succubus, and which is the actual name of the script. And then, oh no, that's a lame name. And then having blood splatter all over it so that when the camera zooms in, all you can read is the word suck.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
which is clearly intentional.
Absolutely. I mean, a bit of a spoiler, but I just finished doing a rewatch with my girlfriend of Gilmore Girls, and Gilmore Girls ends the same way as this movie. With the revelation that it's all a story called The Gilmore Girls.
But wait a minute,
Rory's
Steve.
blood splatters all over the
Oh, yeah. That's I was going to say that's in the reboot, right?
Yeah, it's in the year in the life like nonsense. So you can take that as
parties like this were going on at Stars Hollow all the time.
Oh, constantly.
Wait, maybe we found out who Helen Robinson is after all.
It's Amy Sherman Palladino. Oh, we knew it. And we knew it all along. Yeah.
No, they weren't talking fast enough in this movie.
No,
I love Amy Sherman Palladino, and I love Gilmore Girls, and I'm glad to hear you say that you revisited it, because this time of year, I say this time of year when we're recording it. Unfortunately, we record very far in advance, so we'll be a little further into the seasons, but we're just starting to get hints of like autumn weather in the air, and there's something about this change in seasons that makes me really want to sit down with a cup of pumpkin spice coffee and watch some Gilmore Girls. I'm sorry if we lost a lot of listeners.
No, let me tell you something here. I've come to realize this. The Venn diagram of horror fans and Gilmore Girl fans is almost a circle. Okay, it's almost just one overlapped circle, because we all love cozy fall vibes, and Gilmore Girls is basically just sweaters and coffee, the show. So like who doesn't love that? It's weirdly 1-to-1.
Right. This is a movie. Dreamaniac is a movie that Lane would show to Rory.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm laughing along as if I haven't got a Luke's coffee mug like in the kitchen just down the corridor.
I'm telling you, it's 1-to-1. It's a perfect circle, right? People write in and let us know, but I think we stumbled onto something here. I think there's a real crossover.
This is going to have to be one of our Instagram polls. Like, do you agree that there is a big crossover between horror movies in fall season and Gilmore Girls?
Yeah.
When you eventually finish all of Charles Band, in the year 2038, then you'll be able to do a Gilmore Girls rewatch.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's done that podcast yet. So
certainly not.
Gilmore
brand new territory.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not sure if I have too much else to say about Dreamaniac, as evidenced by our long Gilmore Girls diatribe. Do we have any final thoughts on the movie Dreamaniac?
I do. Alex mentioned how visceral some of the kill scenes actually are. I mean, some of them are pretty, kind of poorly staged and obviously cheaply lit and underlit and not really gory, but occasionally they do up the ante, like the drill through the head and the head falling off. And so I want to give some props to Tom Schwartz, who did the gore effects, because he worked on a couple of movies of note. I think he did the makeup effects for Hell Night, which is a horror movie I like a lot, from 1981 with Linda Blair.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He worked, I'm not sure entirely what capacity, but he contributed some makeup effects to Scanners.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and he worked on one of my favorite bad movies, again, given the Mystery Science Theater treatment, which is Bill Rabane's Giant Spider Invasion.
Oh, gotta love it.
Which is incredibly fun. If you're like some of those, like 1970s.
Jared, what's that film about?
I don't know. They're being a little obtuse in their marketing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we're getting.
Yeah, it's actually a history of the East India Trading Company. It's a really it's very intelligent. Yeah. It's written by Helen Robinson, aka David Mamet. Yeah, really good stuff.
So, Alex, I forced this movie upon you. You reluctantly agreed. But now as we go into...
Was I that reluctant, though? I believe I was like, I'll watch any old shit. And yeah, I think actually was what happened.
That is the spirit. That is the spirit.
I think so. I think you were pretty game to do it. And now that you've done it and you've watched the movie and you've been here talking about it, like, what are your final thoughts on Dreamaniac from 1986?
Like you say, if it was 60,000, it was effectively a debut feature. Like with all of these things, it could have done with an extra pass on the script. It could have done with an extra pass in the edit. It could have done with maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes more of actual film. But I'm not going to complain about anything that's under 90 minutes. I think had this film been more professionally lit and they'd employed a focus puller of some description, then I wonder whether this would have cut through a bit more. Like I say, I think there's a sort of a queer undercurrent in this that I think could have found an audience. And so, if anybody is out there sitting on a pristine print of Dreamaniac and wants to put it into an LGBTQ plus friendly film festival, I think this would be a fun midnight movie.
I think so too. Yeah.
I agree with that. And one thing that I noticed watching this movie is that it must be harder to obtain the rights to heavy metal music. Because we have this guy with his Def Leppard shirt on, and we have virtually no metal music in the movie at all. And it's just like, this is such a big part of this guy's character, and yet he's wearing a white t-shirt and a pair of blue jeans through most of the movie. He does not look like a guy who would be into metal. He's got a lot of pages of magazines ripped out and taped up onto his wall, but he's got, he has no leather, no spikes, no tattoos, nothing. It's like kind of an interesting thing that he's this heavy metal guy, because he really doesn't look the part for most of the movie. And that aspect of it, the heavy metal, I guess it's just kind of falling into the satanic panic times of the 1980s maybe. That were going on, that they had to sort of make the connection between Satanism and metal, even though it doesn't really belong. But you mentioned this movie maybe being curated within an LGBTQ friendly film festival. If a pristine print of it exists in some way, I do feel like people would find a lot to enjoy in this movie. What I found was this when I popped it on, and I remembered, okay, it's a 16 millimeter shot for video. It's as standard a definition as you could possibly get. But what it reminded me of is, so every year in July, I go to the Mahoning Drive-In in Lehighton, Pennsylvania for VHS Fest. And it's a huge event with like 100 vendors selling all kinds of memorabilia, merchandise, and VHS tapes. And it's collectors from all over come out to the drive-in for this. They always have guests and things like that. And then what they do it's usually a weekend thing. And on Friday night and Saturday night, they'll show like 3 movies, usually shot on VHS or shot on video movies. Mm-hmm. And just about all of those movies have the same look as this movie. So what I did this time watching it was I put myself in the mindset of that I was sitting in a camping chair in the drive-in with this movie playing. I was laughing at some of the parts. I was kind of I approached it the way that I would some of the straight to video stuff that I've seen at VHS Fest before. And it just helped me enjoy it so much more with that aesthetic. Like I almost, even though it wasn't shot on video, I was treating it like it was a shot on video movie and that it was a novelty. And I was able to take the novelty aspect and use that as a liability or as a attribute rather than a liability of the movie.
Yeah.
And so it helped me kind of watch and enjoy everything because I just was in a different, I wasn't trying to sit down and really go too deep with it. I was trying to just enjoy it surface level in that way. And I think it helped me walk away from this movie, like having more positive things to say about it. And I just had a pretty good time. I don't know that this is necessarily one I'll revisit anytime soon, but I enjoyed it well enough.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same way. Like I think I was largely pretty bored by it, and it's hard to look at, but then it has some moments of like batshit insanity that kind of perk you up, and it's interesting as kind of the first film of a figure who is often maligned, but he is very important to our show and to the films that we are covering. And so he's a big figure in this universe, and this is where he got his start. And so it's interesting to see that genesis. It's interesting to see how much he's evolved or not evolved, or he's been pretty, say what you will, he's been pretty consistent throughout his career. Like whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, he's been pretty consistent, and he seems like a cool dude. I want to have him on the show sometime. I feel bad because I think I've badmouthed a lot of his movies, but I do want to have him on the show because I think he's got some really interesting perspective, and he just seems like he's got a great sense of humor about himself and about his career, and has a pretty good understanding of his place in the culture. Which
but when you direct 182 movies, they can't all be bangers.
No. Honestly, he puts them out so quickly. It's amazing that any of them work at all. And I think he does have a handful that really do work, like the aforementioned Puppet Master 3, which is like, this is what happens when you take slightly more than a week to make a movie, and you have a little bit more of a budget to work on something. Like, he's got some chops. He actually does. But it's a quantity over quality kind of game for DeCoteau, sure. I think. But I've definitely had a ton of fun talking about this movie, and we're so excited, Alex, that you could join us and lend your insights and your amazing synopsis that really helped me make some sense out of this movie. Where can our listeners find you, all the amazing stuff that you're working on, and basically anything?
Oh, yeah. So I love to chat horror movies and all sorts of other things as well. So you can come and find me on Instagram or Threads or Letterboxd at Alex J. Ayling. I'd love that. You can hear my voice on Stevie's Brain Rot once a month with Brad and Stevie doing Mates of Hell, and on the Evolution of Horror. And something I did early this year.
I know. I'm so mad. I forgot to mention this in the intro. I know what you're going to say, Alex, and I even have it. I have this thing. I was one of the Kickstarters for it. Go ahead. Explain this.
I love it.
Awesome.
So I designed a card game to go alongside the Evolution of Horror, and you can now buy it. Yes, if you go to evolutionofhorror.com/final cut, it's a really fun, casual card game that you can play with your friends at the pub, in the bar, after you've watched a scary movie. And the aim of the game is to create your own scary movie with a killer, a victim, a setting, and an item. And there's loads of fun Easter eggs in there for horror hounds. So check it out if you so fancy it. But that was a lot of fun.
I heartily endorse the game. I got it when it first came out. The cards are gorgeous. It's a nice size little small compact card game you could pretty much take anywhere with you. And I realized as soon as I finished the introduction and you started talking, Alex, I went, shit, I didn't talk about the game.
But it's great. Yes, I made it with my good friend Mike Buncer, who's been on, who runs the Evolution, and Mike Lee Graham did all the illustrations as well. So the three of us made it completely independently. So if you want to support independent creators and art, that's a good place to go.
I would recommend checking it out and getting yourself Final Cut, the board game, because I'm sure that you'll love it. If you love what we do, you can jump onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify, drop us a little 5-star rating and maybe a brief review if you feel so inclined to do so. You can keep up with the show and see what we're doing on all of our social media. We tend to be mostly present on Instagram, so you can follow the show at puppetmasters_castlefreaks. You can follow me at _Giallo_Jerry or Steve at Minotaur Matador. We are on Threads and X as well, and we will be hopefully beefing up our YouTube channel. For now, you can go on YouTube and find our channel and listen to audio versions of the show on there. Hopefully more stuff coming in the future for YouTube. But we'll see how that goes because we're not the only show that Steve has to promote. Steve, what else have you got going on?
Yes. My other show is called Cinema Arcade. That's cinema and arcade as one word because we are doing exactly that. We are watching movies and then playing the video games based on those movies to see how they contrast and compare. Again, this show is far ahead of where we are in our recording for Cinema Arcade. So it's not I'm not entirely sure where we're going to be by the time this episode comes out. But we have nearly 100 episodes out there already. Everything from major classics like Aladdin and Chronicles of Riddick to less noteworthy games like E.T. or Wayne's World or things like that. You know,
have you gotten to the Dreamaniac game yet?
Not yet.
From what I understand.
Any minute now. I'm waiting for that one to come out on Atari 2600. But definitely, yeah, we are going to try and step up our YouTube presence, but we do, we're quite busy in our own personal lives aside from all the different projects that we're working on. But please do come back and catch us next week because we have another exciting movie that we are going to be talking about. We are returning to one of the earlier franchises that we've talked about on this show. We are coming back to talk about Oblivion 2, Whiplash. Is that no, that's not
Backlash.
Backlash, excuse me. Backlash. It stars the character Whiplash. And that's that. If you don't remember, that is the fun sci-fi Western comedy mashup from Sam Irving, who we interviewed. He was on the show a while back talking about these two movies. And so it's going to be a lot of fun getting back into that world. Lots of rootin', lots of tootin'. Very excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to get back into that world because the first Oblivion is so much fun. I know Oblivion 2 is one of those typical Full Moon projects that was shot back to back with the first movie. So there won't be too much of a change in character and tone, and same director and returning guest joining us to talk about that one too. So it's definitely going to be a fun time. Thanks again to Alex Ayling for joining us to talk about Dreamaniac, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks, guys.